A Great Argead Saga Alexine, Alexander the Great. Volume 2, Restless, The Sacred Band. By Macaulay Naki. Episode 11, Miniature Sacred Band. Mid-November, the Great Gymnasium of Thebes. The morning air in Thebes was sharp, biting with the chill of late autumn, and carrying the earthy scent of rubbed olive oil, sweat, and damp earth. In the sprawling central court of the gymnasium, the elite youth of the city practiced their wrestling and spear work, but in a far recessed corner, sheltered by stone colonnades, an entirely different kind of military exercise was taking place. Philip, stripped to the waist and coated in the traditional fine dust of the arena, stood at the head of a rigid block of 29 other Macedonian hostages. Among them stood Antigonus, with his lanky frame concealing explosive agility, Peithon, watchful and calculating, Leonnatus, intensely loyal and fiercely competitive, Menyllus, steady-handed and unyielding under pressure, and young Amyntor, whose youthful eyes darted nervously across the ranks before finding his footing. While other foreign hostage groups from across Greece spent their leisure hours gambling away their allowances or drowning their sorrows in wine, Philip had driven his countrymen onto the training grounds to trade their soft tunics for practice ashwood spears. Again! Philip's voice rang out across the courtyard, clear, sharp, and showing none of the teenage voice cracks that usually plagued boys his age. The shield must overlap. If I can see the bare metal of the man behind you, your formation is already breached and you are dead. They still move like highlanders, Philip thought, his gray eyes scanning the ragged alignment of his companions with ruthless precision. They fight for individual glory, waiting for the chance to hack down an enemy single-handedly. If they face a disciplined Greek line out there like this, they'll be slaughtered in 10 heartbeats. I have to tear that arrogance out of them and rebuild them from the boots up. He wasn't merely teaching them how to thrust a spear. He was building a miniature sacred band. Through endless observation of the Theban veterans, he had realized that their terrifying strength came from the unbreakable bond between the men standing side by side, a mutual devotion that turned a double line of hoplites into a living wall. He began pairing the Macedonian boys deliberately, putting the strongest with the fastest, the oldest with the youngest, forcing them to breathe, step, and move as single, cohesive units. Antigonus adjusted his grip on his heavy wood and hide shield, gritting his teeth against the burning ache in his shoulders. The prince drives us harder than the mountain winders ever did, Antigonus thought, lunging forward to parry a simulated thrust from Menyllus. He doesn't care that we're hostages, or that our families forgot us the moment we cross the passes. He looks at us and sees an instrument. By the gods, he's terrifying, but if anyone can find a way out of this cage and back to Pella, it's him. Beside him, Menyllus locked his shield hard against Leonnatus's flank, their bronze rims grinding together with a dull clank. Look at the Thebans, Philip commanded, pointing his training spear toward a pair of veteran hoplites practicing their synchronized advances nearby. They don't fight for their own names. They look for the gap in the line and they plug it together. Antigonus, your shield is too high, you're leaving your ribs open to a low hook. Leonnatus, step into the gap the second he strikes. You are his shadow, not an independent actor, Leonnatus grunted, shifting his weight instantly to cover his companion's blind spot. He sees everything, Leonnatus mused internally, his muscles burning as he maintained the crushing pressure of the shield wall. Every misstep, every wasted breath. Epaminondas teaches him philosophy and geometry, but Philip translates it all into steel and wood. Young Amyntor stumbled slightly under the weight of his practice armor, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Peithon immediately reached out with a gauntleted hand, hooking it firmly into Amyntor's belt to haul him back into alignment before the formation fractured. Keep your feet under you, Amyntor, Peithon muttered under his breath, his eyes fixed forward. If you drop, the whole front rank goes down with you. As they moved through the brutal, repetitive drills, the abstract logic of geometry and tactics that Philip had been absorbing from Epaminondas began to take physical, brutal form. He was taking the chaotic, individualistic spirit of the Macedonian highlands and crushing it into disciplined, geometric shape. Under the watchful, silent eyes of the Theban instructors patrolling the perimeter, the young prince was no longer just an exile studying in a foreign school. He was beginning to act like a true commander of men. Watching from the shadowed colonnade above, Pammenes leaned leisurely against a cool marble pillar. a small, knowing smile playing on his lips. He saw with absolute clarity exactly what the boy was doing. He isn't just playing at soldiering to pass the time, Pammenes thought, his gaze lingering on Philip's intense, unblinking focus. He is building the intellectual and tactical foundation of a nation, one brutal shield clash at a time. We brought a lion cub into our garden to secure our northern frontier, and he's learning how to tear down the fences. The afternoon sun dipped lower behind the western wall of the Great Gymnasium, casting long, fractured shadows across the dusty training floor where the Macedonian boys still panted in rhythm. Pammenes pushed himself away from the marble pillar, his sandals clicking rhythmically against the stone paving as he descended the short flight of steps into the courtyard. The air around him still carried the sharp metallic tang of sweat and unpolished ashwood, but the 29 young hostages had ground to a halt at his approach, their chests heaving, their eyes locked rigidly on the veteran Theban commander. Philip lowered the tip of his practice spear, resting the butt against the packed earth. He wiped a streak of sweat and gym dust from his forehead with the back of a calloused forearm, his gray eyes narrowing slightly as he met Pammenes' gaze. He's been watching us all morning, Philip thought, his pulse still hammering a steady battle cadence in his ears. He sees how tightly I've locked the shield wall. Does he think we're preparing a mutiny? Does he see the chain link snapping before we've even built the cage? Pammenes stopped a few paces away, his expression unreadable, though a faint, knowing glint lingered in the corners of his eyes. He slowly looked down at the uneven ranks, at Antigonus catching his breath, at Peithon steadying young Amyntor, at Leonnatus resting a hand over his bruised ribs. You drive them hard, young Argiad, Pammenes said, his voice carrying easily across the silent court. One might think you were preparing to storm the Cadmea, rather than win a gymnasium laurel. A quiet ripple of tension passed through the Macedonian ranks. Antigonus shifted his weight, his fingers tightening instinctively around his spear shaft, while Menyllus squared his shoulders, ready to step into the line if the conversation turned sour. Philip did not flinch. He met the Theban commander's stare with the cold, absolute composure of a prince who had learned early that survival required looking a wolf straight in the eye. The games in the arena are for children who have homes to go back to, General, Philip replied, his voice level and steady, carrying none of the defensive crack of a 13-year-old. We are 400 miles from Pella, surrounded by men who view us as leverage on a parchment roll. If we do not learn to move as one iron wall here, the mountains will tear us apart the moment we cross back over the Aragon. Pammenes stared at him for a long, heavy moment. In that quiet pause, the sheer weight of what the boy was attempting hung in the autumn air. Not just a group of exiled boys playing at war, but the deliberate, calculated forging of a military doctrine right under the nose of their captors. A slow, deliberate smile finally broke across Pammenes' weathered face. The mountains are cold, Philip, and the men who rule them are merciless, Pammenes murmured, stepping closer until he stood just an arm's length from the young prince. Epaminondas teaches you how a state thinks. Pelopidas teaches you how a nation bargains. But no philosopher in Greece can teach you what you are carving into these boys' bones right now. He reached out, his callous fingers tapping firmly against the heavy bronze rim of Philip's practice shield. Keep drilling them, Pammenes said softly, his voice dropping into a conspiratorial undertone meant only for the prince. If you are going to build a hammer, make sure it is heavy enough to break whatever stands in your way. Just remember who taught you how to swing it. As Pammenes turned and walked back toward the shaded colonnade, leaving the dust and the sweat behind him, Philip didn't waste a heartbeat. He spun back toward his companions, his eyes blazing with intense, unyielding focus. You heard him! Philip's voice cracked across the courtyard, sharp as a drawn blade. Form up. Antigonus, your flank is sagging again. Let's run the advance and we'll drill 10 more times before the bell. Move. Master and the prodigy. The Theban military training ground was more than just a field, it was a revelation. After the cramped, shadowed courtyards of Pella and the endless dusty roads of Macedon, this vast space seemed to breathe with purpose, alive with the spirit of martial excellence. The air itself vibrated with the disciplined clang of bronze on bronze, sharp, clipped commands, and the rhythmic beat of hundreds of marching feet. This was unlike anything Philip had seen among the chaotic individualistic skirmishes of Macedonian tribal levies or the rigid, often predictable drills of Spartan imitation. This was something entirely different, a living proof of a sophisticated military philosophy. Pammenes, always the composed and watchful guide, led Philip through the organized chaos, his movements smooth and familiar. He moved with an effortless authority, exchanging nods with passing officers and veterans, clearly at ease amid Theban power. Philip, still a bit stiff from the journey from Macedon, absorbed everything like a starving man at a feast. He watched phalanxes wheel with breathtaking fluidity, ranks of spearmen moving as a single cohesive unit, their long doru spears standing like a living metallic forest. Pammenes explained that the Thebans valued intellectual pursuits just as much as martial skill, which was evident in every precise maneuver. Every drill had a deliberate, almost academic precision, reflecting a sense of smart design behind each formation. General Pammenes often supervises the morning drills himself, Pammenes explained, his voice low, just loud enough to carry over the constant noise of training. He believes a commander must know the very breath of his men, feel the pulse of the phalanx beating within his chest. Philip's heart quickened. Pammenes. The name was a legend even in distant Macedon, whispered with a mixture of fear and grudging admiration. The man who had shattered Spartan supremacy at Leuctra. The architect of Theban power, reshaping Greece with every strategic move. Epaminondas's weathered face bore the marks of countless battles. His features were stark and sharply defined, and his eyes, though narrowed in concentration, gleamed with keen intelligence. His skin, tanned and leathery from years under the relentless Greek sun, was etched with fine lines that spoke of age and hardship. His broad shoulders and strong build showed a man used to physical exertion and command. His large, calloused hands revealed years of wielding both a sword and the reins of power. They moved toward a specific section of the vast field, a magnetic pull drawing them to a dense group of hoplites drilling with fierce intensity. Their movements were quicker, their cohesion tighter, and their presence radiated an almost tangible aura of elite skill. These were not just soldiers, they were men forged into a single unbreakable weapon, with each unit a living, breathing part of an impossible whole. Philip had never seen such disciplined ferocity. Close beside Philip, walking quietly within the shadow of the Macedonian prince, Antigonus, Peithon, Leonnatus, Menyllus, and young Amyntor observed the spectacle with wide, astonished eyes. Look at how they hold their line, Antigonus thought, his fingers twitching instinctively toward an imaginary spear hilt as he watched the seamless rotation of the ranks. If our highlanders tried this, we'd be tripping over our own cloaks in 5 minutes. This isn't just fighting, it's geometry made lethal. Peithon narrowed his eyes, tracking the spacing between the hoplite shields. There are no gaps, not an inch of vulnerability. They move as one beast. Leonnatus swallowed hard, glancing sidelong at Philip, whose gaze was locked entirely on the marching column with a look of ravenous concentration. He's eating it all up, Leonnatus mused internally. Every step, every angle. He's not just watching them, he's stealing their soul. And here, Pammenes said, his voice imbued with a quiet, almost reverent pride, is the very heart of our army, young Philip. The sacred band of Thebes. Philip felt a chill run down his spine, despite the warmth of the Boeotian sun. He had heard the stories, of course, about the 300 chosen men, lovers fighting side by side, bound by unbreakable vows of courage and devotion. He watched them now, their movements a seamless flow, their eyes burning with a collective, almost sacred fire. They were not merely soldiers, they were a living testament to an ideal, a philosophy of war elevated to an art form. Just then, a figure stepped away from the drilling unit and moved toward them with a brisk, confident stride. This was Caphisidoros, a name Philip had already learned in Thebes, known as the current commander of the sacred band. His face was stern, weathered by the sun and discipline, with sharp, assessing eyes. Pammenes, Caphisidoros greeted with a nod, his gaze flicking to Philip with a professional curiosity. Caphisidoros, Pammenes replied, inclining his head. And this is Prince Philip of Macedon, our honored guest. Caphisidoros' eyes narrowed slightly as he assessed Philip. A long way from home, Prince? I trust you find Thebes illuminating. His tone carried a subtle edge, hinting at the sacred band's unwavering loyalty to their city and a natural skepticism. toward a foreign prince, even one held as a hostage. Philip, sensing the unspoken challenge, looked him in the eye. Illuminating, Commander. The discipline here is unlike anything I have seen. It speaks volumes of Theban strength. A faint flicker of approval, nearly imperceptible, crossed Cassiodorus's stern features. Discipline is the bedrock, Prince, but purpose is the mortar. He then gestured toward the drilling sacred band. We fight for Thebes with Thebes. Our purpose is absolute. Beside Philip, young Menyllus whispered under his breath to Amyntor, "Did you hear him? They talk about the city like it's a living god." Amyntor nodded mutely, keeping his eyes fixed straight ahead. Then, Philip saw him. Standing slightly apart from the sacred band, observing their movements with an almost unnerving stillness, was a man of unassuming stature. He wore simple military attire, free of showiness, yet he radiated a commanding presence that felt like heat from a forge. His face, though not traditionally handsome, revealed an intense intellect in his deep-set eyes and thoughtful brow. This was not the rugged, fiery image of Pelopidas, but a man whose strength seemed to lie in the quiet, immense power of his mind. "General Pammenes said, bowing respectfully as they approached the imposing figure. Cassiodorus, although the commander of the sacred band, also offered a deferential bow. Epaminondas turned, his gaze first drifting to Pammenes and Cassiodorus, then fixing with nearly unsettling directness on Philip. Those eyes seemed to perceive everything, dissecting, analyzing, as if peeling away layers to reveal his true self. Philip felt as if his thoughts were being read. He instinctively straightened, returning Pammenes' respectful bow, a shiver of awe passing through him. Behind him, Peithon stiffened slightly under the general's piercing stare, while Leonnatus held his breath. "He looks right through you," Leonnatus thought nervously. "He doesn't see a prince, he sees a problem to be solved." "Pammenes," Epaminondas acknowledged, his voice surprisingly soft, yet clear and authoritative. His gaze then shifted entirely to Philip. "And this must be young Philip of Macedon." "Welcome to Thebes." Prince Philip found his voice, though it felt rough, his throat dry with the weight of the moment. "General Epaminondas," he managed. "It is an honor." 1. "I have heard much of your strategies." Epaminondas offered a small, knowing smile, a glint of amusement in his deep-set eyes. "Strategies are but lines on a tablet, young prince. Ink on parchment. It is the men, and the purpose that drives them, that give those lines life." He gestured toward the drilling sacred band, a deep affection in his eyes as he watched their flawless movements. "Do you truly understand what you see here?" Philip looked back at the elite unit, now even more awe-inspiring under the general's gaze. "They move as one, General, as if a single mind guides them. It's unnatural." "Certainly," Epaminondas replied. "They are bound by more than drill, Prince. They are bound by brotherhood, by love, and an unbreakable oath to Thebes. It is a bond stronger than iron. It is the very soul of our phalanx." He turned to Philip, his expression sharpening. "In Macedon, your strength is individual prowess, the courage of your cavalry, the strength of your kings. Here, we teach the strength of the collective mind moving with a single purpose." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. "You will train with them, Philip?" "Not with the sacred band, not yet," he added with a faint fatherly smile, "but with our younger hoplites. You will learn to move as part of a greater whole, to think not as an individual, but as a segment of an unstoppable force. For the mind is the sharpest blade in any war. Without it, the mightiest phalanx is a blunt instrument." Philip's eyes widened with a sudden, intense hunger. This was more than he had dared hope for, a twist of fate far more enriching than mere political detention. The cold stone walls of Pella and the treacherous whispers of his homeland felt impossibly distant. This man offered a forge for greatness. Antigonus exchanged a brief, sidelong glance with Menyllus, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. "He's going to learn how they break us," Antigonus thought grimly. "And when he takes that knowledge back north, nothing will be able to stop him." "I'm eager to learn, General," Philip said, his voice now steady and imbued with the reverence of a student before a master. Epaminondas nodded, acknowledging the spark of potential in the boy. "Your father's phalanx was a wall of brave men, Prince Philip," he began, his voice calm and melodic. "But when the Illyrians came, that wall shattered. Do you know why?" Philip stepped closer, his exhaustion forgotten. The Illyrians are barbarians, General. They swarm like hornets. Our men were brave, but they were overwhelmed by the chaos. Bravery is the refuge of the poorly led, Epaminondas countered, his eyes piercing. Your phalanx failed because it was static. It was a solid block that assumed the enemy would be polite enough to hit it from the front. The Illyrians used the terrain and speed, the general continued. Your father's men were too heavy to turn and too thin to crush. They were caught in the middle, slow enough to be outflanked, yet light enough to be pierced. In Thebes, we do not build walls, we build hammers. We lean the entire weight of the army onto a single point, the oblique line. We ignore the enemy's strength and destroy their heart before they even know the battle has begun. He leaned back, studying the boy. If you want to save Macedonia, you must stop thinking of the phalanx as a defensive tool. You must turn it into a predatory animal. You must combine the reach of the spear with the mathematics of the wedge. You don't just fight the men, Philip whispered, a sudden, terrifying clarity dawning in his gray eyes. You fight the space they stand in. Exactly, Epaminondas smiled, a cold intellectual spark in his eyes. Tomorrow, the training grounds. We will see if you can turn the logic of the field into blood. Razor's Edge in Pella. The marble floors of the royal palace in Pella did not echo with triumph. They echoed with the hollow, nervous footsteps of men walking over fresh graves. The funeral pyre of King Alexander II had barely cooled outside the city walls, and the smoke from the royal sacrifice still hung like a greasy gray shroud over the rooftops. Within the dimly lit throne room, Regent Ptolemy of Valoros stood before a towering bronze brazier, his hands outstretched to catch its heat, though his bones felt chilled to the core. Every shadow stretching across the pillared hall seemed to whisper of betrayal. The king is dead, murdered in the chaos of court faction, and I'm left holding the reins of a fractured state, Ptolemy thought, his eyes narrowing as he stared into the crackling embers. The royal bloodline is reduced to children. Perdiccas is too young to rule alone, and little Philip is already halfway across the mountains, riding in chains or under guard toward the dark hearts of Thebes as a hostage of Pelopidas. If I show a single ounce of weakness, the competing dynastic factions will tear Pella apart before the winter solstice. A heavy, deliberate clank of greaves broke the silence. Meleager, a prominent commander of the royal cavalry and a leader of the hostile rival faction, strode uninvited into the chamber. His hand rested casually, menacingly, upon the pommel of his sword, his eyes glittering with thinly veiled contempt. The couriers have returned from the southern passes, Regent Meleager said, his voice dripping with false deference. Pelopidas and his Theban escort have crossed into Thessaly with young Philip and the other royal hostages safely in hand. The assembly in Pella is restless. They are asking whether Macedonia is now a free kingdom, or if we have simply traded one master in Susa for another in Thebes. Ptolemy did not turn away from the fire immediately. He let the silence stretch, letting the weight of his authority press down upon the room before he finally pivoted to face the general. Meleager tests me already, Ptolemy mused internally, his pulse quickening beneath his linen tunic. He thinks because I traded young Philip to Pelopidas to buy Theban diplomatic recognition and secure my own regency, my grip on the army is slipping. He wants a civil war. He wants to ignite the clans before I have even fastened the crown. The assembly asks too many questions for men who do not hold the ledgers, Meleager, Ptolemy replied, his tone smooth, dangerously calm, and level. Pelopidas took the hostages because a guarantee of peace with Thebes is the only shield that keeps the Illyrian hounds of Bardyllis from flooding down the Axios Valley, while our borders are bleeding. If we bicker amongst ourselves now, we will not have a kingdom left to govern by spring. Meleager took a slow step forward, his jaw tightening. The army does not care for Theban paper, Ptolemy. They care about strength. They see a regent ruling through children, while our northern frontier is choked by Dardanian silver and Illyrian spears. Then we give the army what it demands, Ptolemy shot back, his voice suddenly dropping into a hard metallic edge that made Meleager hesitate. We do not wait for the Illyrians to dictate our terms. You will ride to the frontier garrisons tomorrow morning. Secure the mountain defiles, double the pay of the border guards using what remains of the royal treasury, and make sure every clan chieftain from Almopia to Bacchia knows that Pella is not broken. If they want to test the regency, let them test it against a wall of Macedonian pikes. Meleager stared at the regent for a long, tense moment, searching for a sign of hesitation. Finding none, the general gave a stiff, grudging nod, turned on his heel, and marched out into the night. Ptolemy exhaled slowly, a heavy breath of exhaustion and adrenaline escaping his lips. He walked back to the cold marble throne, his fingers tracing the carved lion heads of the armrest. I have bought a few months of life with Pelopidas's bargains and Meleager's grudging compliance, Ptolemy thought, staring out the high, unglazed window toward the dark, menacing silhouette of the northern mountains, where Bardalus and his Dardanian hosts were hammering out their silver and sharpening their iron. To survive, a regent cannot merely manage the court. He must outmaneuver the dead, buy off the living, and hold the borders together with sheer, unyielding will. The throne is secured for today. Tomorrow, the war begins. To be continued in Episode 12, Piraeus shadows beneath the olive groves. Watch and listen now. Watch the cinematic video trailer. Listen to the full saga now. Bookmark Volume 1, Telesius Playlist. Volume 2, Restless, the Sacred Band Playlist. Bookmark Volume 1, Divine Oracle Playlist. Join the Vanguard. A new episode drops every single day until the epic conclusion of Volume 2. Each chapter delivers a tight, hyper-focused 10 to 30-minute hit of cinematic historical drama, perfect for your daily plunge into antiquity. Subscribe to follow the bloody rise of the Argead dynasty. Thumbs up to help push our Vanguard through the algorithm's gauntlet. Comment below.